Hello guys, my name is Marco Landry and welcome to my channel. So today is a beautiful day in Ottawa. For those of you who have watched me before, I was always in a really dark garage because it was so cold. Today it's nice and sunny outside, the snow is melting, it's almost motorcycle season, so I'm super excited. And today I'm going to be doing some additional body work. There was a few changes that I had to do to the fasteners on the bike. So if you haven't seen the previous videos, you can click above and see what I did previously. But for those of you who have seen the videos, you will know that I had some issues with the fairing stay and connecting my upper fairing to the fairing stay. So what I did is that I ordered some fasteners or some brackets from Norton Motorsport. And this is what I'll be installing today. So these brackets are basically just a way to attach your fairing with a D-ring or a quick release fastener. So this will be behind the bodywork attached to the fairing stay, and I will be able to secure everything in place with this fastener. So that's the first thing I'm going to install. The next step after that will be to install this little bracket here. This is a bracket that will be used to support my race seat on the bike. So for those of you again that have seen the previous videos, you will know that I just sandwich the tail of the bike with the plate underneath, and it was solid, but when I sat on the bike I could feel it moving just a little bit. So I called I1 Moto or Sharkskinz, explained everything. Actually, I sent them an email and I explained everything. And they said, yeah, no, you need a bracket under the tail to support the tail. So they sent me this bracket free of charge, and the bracket basically will support the tail of the bike. However, there's this little flimsy Phillips screw that is used to attach the fairing to the bracket. I'm not a big fan of this, so I will be replacing this with a DZUS fastener as well. So I'll just install a D-spring clip underneath. I'll drill it on both sides. I'll remove the riv nut that's in there, and hopefully that will work better and it's going to be easier to attach and detach from the bike. So that's the other thing I'll be doing. And I also had some issues with my previous windshield. So you can see here that I had to Dremel out the side in order to fit this in front of the bike. And I was trying to pry it a bit too much, and I ended up breaking the part that was here. So I ordered a new Puig windscreen or windshield, and I'll probably Dremel out some portion on this as well, but I'll leave it a bit wider than this one so that I don't break it once more. And also my lower fairing, there was one hole that was not properly aligned, so I'll patch this up, re-drill, and there was a bit of fiberglass that needed to be done on this. So it might be too much for this video, but if I have enough time to compress everything in one video, you'll see everything. If not, I'll have a part 2 where I'll finish all the body work in a separate episode. So on that note, there's a lot of stuff to do, so stay right there and we'll get started. Just before I get started, I wanted to let you know that this is what I'm going to be installing. So this piece here, as I mentioned earlier, will go in between my upper fairing and the fairing stay. So you can see here that I already had some holes that were pre-drilled, and these holes will need to be patched because this one here only has one hole where I'm going to use a DZUS Panex adapter to connect the upper fairing to this bracket that's going to be connected on the fairing stay. So that will be sandwiched in between the fairing stay and the bodywork. I'm just going to take the bodywork apart and I'll mount these up, put the bodywork again on the bike, and we'll see if I can center this properly, and then I'll start drilling the bodywork. So stay tuned. I'll remove the bodywork and I'll come back with all of this hopefully aligned and ready to be assembled. All right, so this is what it looks like here. This is the plate once more. and you can see that the Panex ZUS clip is in the back. Well, that might be a bit more challenging than I was expecting, because the fasteners are not long enough, and also because of this type of fastener, I'll need to drill this area here so that the fastener can go through. So luckily I have some extra long fasteners that will fit there with the same type of diameter for the head, and they're just longer in the same thread pattern, so that's gonna be okay. We'll mark this, and I'll start drilling to see if we can put the fastener there, because right now if I just put the fastener, the head of the ZUS fastener will hit the fairing stay in the back here, and I won't be able to grab properly. So I didn't realize there was going to be some extra drilling like this, but I guess it is what it is. I should have read the instruction a bit better before I ordered this. I was under the impression that I would get the S-spring type of ZUS fastener and not the Panex one. It turns out that I had to do things a bit differently because the holes here were too close, and I decided I was going to patch these holes first, but since I'm going to patch this, I will also patch all the other parts of the fairings that I need to patch as well. So I've took the bikes out and I've been sanding for the last couple of minutes. I'll finish sanding this, and after this is done sanding, I'll start laying the fiberglass, and we will start patching everything before I can finish the project. So with this bracket now, I've finally managed to get some bolts that were long enough to attach the bracket to the fairing stay. However, when you take your fastener and you try to connect this, it won't grip because there's no holes behind this bracket. So my ZUS fastener won't be able to grip properly. So that's why I'll just simply take a Sharpie, mark this, or I'll take my self-centering punch and punch it. So what I'll end up doing is that I'm going to take my drill bit, drill a hole that's going to be big enough so that this ZUS Panex fastener can go through and properly attach the receptacle or the mounting bracket in the back. Before we start this, I'm just going to cover this so that there's no metal particles that will fly everywhere. And you notice as well that I've removed the multi-display from there as well. And I'm just going to simply mark this. So I'm going to take my marker and just mark the center of it properly. And on top of this, I'll just take my self-centering punch and I'll punch the middle of it, or as close to the middle as possible anyway. And that looks good, so I'll punch this. And I think we are right on the money here. Alright, so now that this is marked, I'll simply remove these bolts, and we will start drilling. We'll just make sure that the fastener can go through, and it does. So now it grips properly, and I'll do the same thing on the other side, and after that we will mount the upper fairing to see how it fits with these plates. And so now it fits perfectly. So the fairing is sitting on these two plates with no gaps. So I think it's going to be a great way to attach this without putting too much pressure on that bodywork. All right, so I got the paint here, and basically what I'm doing is I'm going to take an Allen wrench, or you can take a screwdriver, whatever works, whatever is going to fit through the hole in the back. So what you want to do is just take your paint stick, put a bit of paint on the top of something pointy, and then you'll take this and you'll go through the fairing stay, the plate, and then you'll touch the bodywork on the inside, and that will give you an indication of where to drill. You want to take something that's going to be flat enough to carry enough paint to go through, right? So if you take something pointy, you won't have like a nice dot. So you want something that's going to be fairly flat and small enough to go through the hole, but big enough to be able to support some paint on top of it, or carry paint on top of it. So this is what I'm going to do here, and we'll go through that back plate. And you want to make sure that you are following the same angle, otherwise you'll end up drilling at the wrong spot. Alright, so it looks like I have some nice dots on both sides. So what I'm going to do now is take the small drill bit on the drill, and where I had my dot, I'm going to drill through that dot, and then I'll have a reference point, and I'll know where to use the step drill bit when going from the outside towards the inside. So for this one, I'll go from the inside towards the outside of the bodywork. Alright, so I have my two small holes now. Actually, before I do any holes, I'm going to remount this again to make sure that this is at the perfect spot. Alright, so I remounted the fairing once more, or the upper fairing once more. And what I do normally is just take my tiny drill bit that I use to drill the small hole, the small pilot hole, and I push it through and see if it's in the middle of my my bracket. If it is, then I know I'm going to be drilling the right spot. If it goes up a bit, I can always readjust the angle where I'm going to drill to make sure that it's going to work properly and it will be perfectly centered. So I'll do the same thing on the other side. And this way here I had to move the fairing a little bit, but that's normal. I mean, there's a bit of play, so I think that both of them are actually perfectly aligned. So I'll remove this once more. I'll take my my step drill bit, and I'll drill this to a bigger diameter so that the ZUS fastener can fit in. Alright, so now before I reassemble this, I'm gonna take the lower, and I'll attach the lower with a 3 fastener, and I'll mark the remaining spot that needs to be drilled that I patched earlier. So if you recall, this one was not aligned properly and had a bigger crack or bigger gap. So in order to resolve this, I repatched this and will re-drill at the right location. Well, I've assembled the upper with the lower. I've attached it with a fastener, so this is the hole that I need to drill here. And basically I want to make sure that it's about the same distance as this one. So what I'm going to do is just take a piece of paper like this, align that gap or that crack here, put a little mark that's centered with my my fastener, or the hole for the fastener, and I'll transpose this here. So I want my hole to be, I probably want my hole around here. So I'm gonna do this here and transpose the area where it should be drilled. So now I have an even gap throughout. So I'll just basically drill this here. So what I want to do here now is that I know where I'm going to drill, and I'm going to disassemble everything. I'll drill this hole, reassemble this together, or I'll reassemble the two parts together, put another dot on the second layer so I know where to drill. I'll drill the middle hole, and after that we'll drill the two side holes for the S-bar receptacle. So now we will just simply drill this here, and after this is drilled, I'll drill the two pilot holes for the pop rivet on both sides. Okay, we're good to go now. I'll mount this back on the bike, make sure that we can connect this properly to the lower, and also with the two holes that I did earlier in front, make sure that the ZUS Panex filter will attach properly on both sides. So let's get going. That looks super awesome. Like, I just absolutely love it. I think it fits perfectly. It's easy to attach. I didn't have to put any spacers at all. It's just the perfect size. Just have to wiggle it around a little bit before I can grab the back plate, but it's super nice. Like, it fits perfectly. This is done, and I also finished the sides here, so you can see that it fits perfectly now as well. Sorry, there's a bit of sun here, so you can see that it fits perfectly now. Here we go. That's a bit better. Well, you might not be able to see it now, but this is like just really fitting well as well. It was quite a bit of work to get it done, but it's fitting perfectly as well. So I'm super excited about this. The next step will be the tail of the bike. So for the tail of the bike, what I want to do is I had a bracket from Sharkskinz that I mentioned earlier. So what I did is that I installed a bracket here. I had to find two bolts that would fit here properly, and you can see the bolts here, that the top has to be fairly narrow. I was trying to use the body bolts earlier, but that was too wide, so I had to use something a bit narrower. I replaced the riv nut with a DZUS Pro fastener. So now I'll just have quick release fastener as opposed to having this little flimsy bolt or screw that came with this adapter. So I put the tail on this, I marked it with a marker, and now I'll just drill the tail and we'll reassemble it. If it fits properly, then I'll go ahead and mount the tank cover, and once the tank cover is on, I'll drill, or I'll mark the 3 holes in the back to attach the seat and the tank unit to the tail of the bike. All right, so I've identified the center. I'll just drill a small hole with a small drill bit, and after that I'll use the step drill bit on the other side to properly drill this to the right diameter. All right, so now we will reassemble everything on the bike. And this is what the bracket looks like, by the way, with the S-spring in the back. And because that plastic is really thick, I had to put the S-spring, the bar, as close as possible to plastic. So I had to put it on the flat side as opposed to the I side. So I've talked about this before multiple times in previous videos, but this is definitely the way to install it for this piece of equipment. Here we go. So that's it. It fits perfectly. So it's nice and solid, and yeah, you can see how it looks like in the back now. I'll probably just put it this way here. So I didn't have a lot of option to orient this because my S-spring had to go at an angle, so that's why you see this at an angle. Worst case scenario, I can always remove that D-ring part of the fastener and just keep that bolt there, but I don't mind having it at an angle like this anyway, because the body will be black, so that should blend in fairly well with the bodywork. All right, so what I had to do here is that I've secured this in place. I put the underneath of the tail. I've assembled it so that the tail would be nice and solid. And after that was done, I put a fastener in the front to hold this in place. And you can see there's a considerable gap here between the seat and the tail. So it has to go down a bit, and I'm hoping that the fasteners will do the perfect job for this. So when I push it down, I just took my Sharpie and I marked the 3 spots where I'll have the fasteners or the quick release fasteners mounted. So now I'm gonna disassemble the tank and the seat portion. I'll disassemble the tail and I'll start drilling the 3 holes there and the 6 holes for the pop rivets. Okay, so the last step that I want to accomplish today is to mount a windshield on my upper fairing. I will have 2 issues, however. So the first issue is that I will need to trim the windshield in order for this to fit properly in here. The second issue that I will have is that with these new brackets from Norton Motorsport, the fairing is expanding out a bit. So that probably means that the holes that are pre-drilled for the windshield and the pilot holes that are there on the upper fairing now might not line up properly. So that's going to have to be tested and see if it's going to work or not. These windshields have quite a bit of flex. You can see it can flex a little bit. The new one I purchased is not a zero gravity. It's a Puig a windshield, so it's a bit stiffer. So we'll see if it's going to work or not. So you can see that I've mounted the new windshield on the upper fairing. Before doing so, I took my Sharpie while the upper fairing was still attached to the fairing stay, and I took my Sharpie and drew or transposed the area where the fairing stay is touching the bodywork. I just traced around this. So now I'll know where the windshield might just overlap with the fairing stay. So it's going to be hard to see because the windshield is tinted, so we can't really see very well with the camera. But what I'm going to end up doing is that I'm going to take my Sharpie and draw on top of this as well, and I'll know where to cut this extra plastic so that after that I can mount this back. I can mount this back on the bike without having this plastic overlapping my fairing stay brackets. All right, so before I start using my Dremel to trim the windshield so they can fit properly in between the fairing stay brackets on each side, these are the areas that I will trim in order for this to fit properly in between the fairing stay bracket. So I'll trim this out, and after that it should fit properly. The green tape is simply there so that I don't scratch the windshield while I'm using the Dremel. I've just completed the trimming process or the cutting process. So I've cleaned this up here as much as possible, and it looks like it's gonna fit properly in between the 2 upper brackets here. So I'll reinstall it on the upper fairing, I'll mount it and see if it fits properly. Well, it fits, but it's not a perfect fit, so I don't think I'm gonna keep the brackets from Norton. They're spreading the area of contact too far out. So instead of connecting to something like this, it's going much wider. So by going wider, my fairing is expanding, and the 4 holes for the windshield are expanding as well. it doesn't really fit well. So I think I'm gonna have to figure out a different option. And you can see here the gap that I have, and I don't want to over tighten this bolt because I'm afraid it's gonna snap. And same thing on this side, you can see that gap here, that hole. So not a super fan of this, so I'll have to figure out a different option to mount this onto the fairing. This is my last attempt for today, folks. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna use an S-spring. I'm gonna drill 2 holes and I'll mount the S-spring on the back, and I'll try to see if I can use the DZUS Pro fastener to connect to my fairing stay without the receptacle or the plate that I purchased from Norton Motorsport. I'm going to start drilling this now. I've already used my self-centering punch to punch 2 holes here. Now we will mount the fairing and test this out. Alright, so I've remounted the fairing, and I'm gonna use a DZUS Pro fastener. I'll use the longest one, so I have the 35 and the 45. I'll get the 45 and we'll see if it fits in there. Make sure that everything is aligned. Well, it fits. It fits pretty good too, so yeah. So yeah, now my windshield is properly seated, or it's flush against the bodywork, so it fits much better than before. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to remove everything once more, and I'll install the S-spring bar on the air side, and then we'll be done for the day. So it's been a pretty long day, but I think that's going to work out quite well. I'm quite disappointed that I won't be able to use the bracket from Norton Motorsport. I thought that it was going to be a perfect fit, but unfortunately it's not going to work with that fairing stay. So there must be a different fairing stay that would work well with this. So I'll reach out to Norton Motorsport, and I'll give you guys an update if I found anything new on that topic. But for now, no, this is going to work, and that's going to do the trick for me. So yeah, let's get going and let's finish this. Now it's working perfectly. So both fasteners are connected on both sides. It's super solid, it's not moving, and it's also not super tight. There's a bit of flex, so when I attach this, you can feel the bodywork flexing a bit. So when I'm attaching it, there's just a bit of flex, and the windshield still fits perfectly. There's no major gaps. So I'll be able to tighten this a bit more, and that's going to be it. So just to recap, I started with the plates from Norton Motorsport, and I was hoping that was going to work quite well. And unfortunately, even though the design is amazing, it was stretching the fairing too much, and stretching the fairing and the windshield. So that is not a good option for this type of fairing stay. So if you have a different fairing stay, it might work, but yeah, that's not working for me right now. So anyhow, enough about this. So this is done. The tail of the bike now is nice and solid. Before putting that bracket on, the tail was moving slightly, and now with this quick release connector in the back, or the DZUS Pro connector in the back, It's bang on, it's not moving, it's solid. So that's awesome, especially when you're pushing on the bike. Sometimes at track, people will push you or will try to hold you. So it was a bit flimsy before, but now with this, it definitely makes a big difference. So that was the other thing I did. That was worth, really worth the time. And I've installed these receptacles here, or the S-spring bars as well. The seat is connecting very well as well. So, there was, it's not a big thing overall. It doesn't make a big difference on the bike. But having this, where you have a more solid tail, everything's going to be connected here with the same DZUS Pro fasteners. And also in the front, I'm going to be able to use the DZUS Pro fasteners. So I'll have DZUS Pro fasteners throughout the bike now, which definitely makes the process a lot easier because you're always dealing with the same type of fasteners. So I also changed this bracket here at the same time. So I had one of these with a Panex receptacle, and that was aluminum as well. So I changed it to steel. And the steel bracket now has the S-spring bar in the back as opposed to the Panex receptacle. So these are the changes for today. Overall, I'm quite happy with the results. I think that was a lot of work. Fiberglass that's been done. There was the fasteners, the tail, the front, and that extra bracket at the bottom for the lower fairing. Now I can officially say that the bodywork for the bike is done. So now I can start focusing on some other stuff. So I'm going to disassemble all of this, and for the next video I'll start working on the front suspension and changing the internals. So hopefully you'll be back, and until then, stay safe and we'll see you soon. Cheers.